All right. This is kind of a part 2 video, but it has no relation to the part 1. So instead of being a part 2, this is just another round of super fun loadouts. If you guys didn't see the first video, the gameplay you've been seeing on screen is from that video. We took a look at 5 very interesting, in my opinion, and very, very powerful loadouts that you might not expect me to talk about. And some of them are a little bit more mainstream than others, but yeah, if you haven't seen that first video, definitely check it out. There are some extremely viable loadouts. In fact, I was setting out to just make fun loadouts that would make your, Fortnite Save the World gameplay more interesting, but I actually found loadouts that work in the highest end zones, and all of those loadouts can be used in any power level mission, and it was a good time. And today is going to be a little different, because obviously I can only make extremely OP weapons, a certain amount of times, but today we're going to be talking about 5 more that I found interesting enough to talk about. So let's kick it off right away and get into the surround pound build. So this is a popular one that a lot of people have been using for a long time, and it's the basic gist of just spamming the heavy attack on the surround pound, and it's about as simple as that. There is one thing I want to get out of the way right away, and that is the fact that the surround pound, as with I'm pretty sure every single melee in the game, I don't know if this is a bug or overlooked or whatever it is, but you don't actually take durability when you use heavy attacks, and so you can just spam forever. The weapon will never break, and it makes for a really, really fun loadout if you can pair it with enough energy to restore it. So let's start with the weapon. Surround pound, I'm going to link my video on it, link down below if you guys want to use this for more general use cases. It's a very, very good weapon for the Storm King fight. We're running it with a double crit damage, crit rating build, which means with our build, we're critting 56% of the time, which is more often than not, and we're running it energy just so it's universal, and heavy attack efficiency. This might be unnecessary for spamming it forever, but I found that the heavy attack efficiency was a little bit better for smoothing things out since we're, spamming the heavy attack constantly. And this is the build I showed, and I'm going to show you how we might modify it in a second. So first and foremost, Anti-Cuddle Sarah. This is a seasonal hero that comes out around February, around the Valentine's area. So she gives you 22.5 energy with every single melee weapon elimination. That is not great against smashers or thinner crowds of zombies, because if you don't have that constant regeneration of getting an elimination every time you swing, you might run out of energy. And that's where we'll get into some options. We're running Blast from the Past so that you can get Saurian Focus and support. Now, that's what I'm talking about, where Saurian Focus might be better in the lead, because if you can put him in the lead, you are constantly generating 12 energy per second, whether or not you get a kill. And I believe that's how Tic Tac showed it back in the day. Shout out to him. I am way late to this party, but it's still good to show. And if you put him in the lead, Paleo Luna can go in support, and that just adds more damage that we were missing out on prior. So if I was going to recommend you guys recreate this build, I would say don't go with what exactly I'm using in the gameplay. Use kind of what I'm showing on screen here, and that's Southie in the lead, Luna in support, and the rest of this build is about as simple as it can be. Guardian Bull, base game hero. We see him in the daily videos all the time. I point him out all over the map. He comes up about once a month, but he gives you a hardware crit rating bonus. That's why we're up to 56%, and we're using actuated attacks from Tank Penny. Another base game hero. We see her all the time. Hardware damage, just straight up hardware damage. That's a win, easy peasy, can't not use her. Cohen Coconuts, I'm going to recommend this a lot in today's video, and for obvious reasons. It gives you tons of health, which is great if you're using... It gives you tons of health, which is great because we're using Blast from the Past, and a 16% damage bonus, which is just, do you not want 16% damage? So he's a great option. If you want some alternatives, if you're using a energy surround pound, I guess like Resonant Frequency would work if you're not using Paleo Luna, but there really aren't like tons. I guess explosive rounds. You could look through all the different ninjas. If you're not getting enough energy, maybe you can put Anti-Cuddle back in support. Maybe you don't want that heavy attack efficiency perk. There are a lot of options for, replacements, but I'm going to recommend going Coconuts because it's simply the best option. And this will leave you with a build that is really, really good for spamming through big crowds of enemies. I highly recommend it on encampments as it goes through shielders, goes through riot huskies, goes through every enemy in front of you, and is really, really good at crowd clearing. And I found it to be a really fun pick. All right, we're going to segue slightly away from the surround pound by recommending a very, very similar playstyle with a very different means of delivery, and that is a Seismic Smash build. Now, this build, I highly recommend using Seismic Smash and your Shock Tower, and don't be afraid to shoot the enemies. That's a weird thing to say, but typically when you're recommending an entire build based around a certain ability, like, minigun or something, you're usually using it to replace your primary weapons. In this build, you're going to have to finish off some enemies yourself occasionally, and it's recommended to use a great weapon for that. I know it's the most obvious thing to recommend, but it's easy to forget when you're spamming shock towers and your Seismic Smash. So this build is a little bit of a hybrid. So I made a video on Seismic Smash way back in the day. That one was with Ice Queen. That is a very, very good build, and I'm still going to link it down below if you guys want to explore more ways to run this. Her in the lead, you can freeze enemies in place, and it's a really good combination. So that one's great to use if you're running with a team where other people can shoot at the enemies that you've frozen in place. Great for stopping smashers. In this build, we're actually using Vanguard Southie in the lead, and he gives you a 67% cooldown, which means in the lead plus Happy Holidays, you have a 3-second cooldown. Now, Happy Holidays, if you don't have it, is super easy to get. Very, very good perk for abilities. You're going to be using it a lot if you guys are following these kinds of videos. You can unlock it easily by going all the way to the holiday section and just grabbing Ted. Ted is a great suggestion. I'm covering him with my face cam, but he gives you Happy Holidays, and you can research him without a voucher. And he's a great suggestion because he gives you really good minigun damage, and I use him in the support of my minigun builds quite a bit. You also, while we're in the collection book, should consider grabbing Striker AC. Now, the rest of this loadout does not use Striker AC, but Seismic Smash is pretty expensive at about 40 energy per use, and you're going to run out of energy a lot in this build, so Striker AC might be a consideration. I'm not going to be using him, but he does exist, and you can research him perfectly fine. I don't often see him in the wild, in the missions. I cover them every single day, and in the last year, I've only seen him about 4 times, I think, so you might get him in a llama. He might not be worth the flux, but he is an option should you need it. As for the rest of this build, we are using Fuel for the Fallen. He usually comes out in the Valentine season as well, along with Anti-Cuddle Sarah, and he gives you 6 energy per kill, which is really, really useful for keeping up with, well, your energy usage. Now, the other options are Hakuna Matata here, who I did not recommend in my first video because him paired with Ice Queen is a complete waste. However, without Ice Queen freezing our enemies in the lead, stunning them for 3.3 seconds is pretty good, but he's also applying an impact, which is why I'm not recommending Ragnarok. A lot of people would mention Ragnarok because he sends it and then sends it back. You're decreasing your damage by 25%, but because you're hitting an enemy twice, it does end up being a net gain. You are doing more damage with your Seismic Smash, assuming you're hitting the enemy twice. But upping the impact of Seismic Stun means almost every single time you hit an enemy, they're flying off to the side and you're not going to get that second hit. So I actually opted to replace Ragnarok with Static Cling, and that is just Wild Fragment Deadeye. He is, again, available in the collection book. I don't even think you need a voucher. He's in like the Wild West section, I think. Somewhere around there. Even if I'm wrong, you can still get him. Shock Tower applies Affliction, and that is really, really good for clearing out big crowds of enemies, and I highly recommend using your Shock Tower with this build because Seismic Smash just cannot do it all, and why not use Shock Tower? It's there, it's easy, it's really powerful, and I really like it personally. And this is where we get to a bit of an optional point, where Space Technology is really good for just buffing ability energy damage. A straight 15.5% to your Shock Tower and your Seismic Smash. However, if you are brave enough, you can use Rio. So Extraterrestrial Rio gives you a 20% bonus, which is more than 15.5 every single time I've checked, but your shields need to be at least 50% full. She does also buff your weapon, so if you're using an energy weapon alongside your abilities, that could be a really good bonus, but I personally like to get right up into the fight, and with beehives being a thing, and nurses being annoying, and encampments being what they are, you are going to be right up in front of your enemies, and the Seismic Smash ability does play an animation that freezes you in place. So it's really, really tough to avoid taking damage. So I can't really promise that 20% is always going to be available. That one's up to you, Chief. I'm a lot safer with Azealia Clark. I'll take my 4.5% less damage and just keep it consistent. I was using a supercharged Blastotron Mini in my gameplay. That was doing the trick, and I was perfectly happy with it. And as always, going coconuts because of why I said earlier, health and damage is great. If you don't like going coconuts and you are perfectly fine just putting down campfires for health, I can recommend Fragment Generation from Fragment Flurry Jess. I'm going to bring her up in the next build, actually, and she is just really, really good at getting that Shock Tower active more often. But you shouldn't totally need her. Again, there are a ton of options, especially when it comes to Outlanders. I don't like Cyberclops in support, but he does have a 20% chance to just do more damage, and there are a lot of options. I encourage you to scroll through your Outlanders, pick something that works for you, and I'm sure you're going to find a build that definitely will suit your playstyle. All right, here it is. I know, I've seen your comments for years and years. People have been wanting me to talk about Cyberclops forever, and the only time I've ever really brought up Teddy builds are in my Ventures Loadouts videos, where I pretty much always run Fragment Flurry in the lead, and I'm usually running her in the lead because I make my Ventures Loadouts videos at the beginning of the season, and she will not give you an energy Teddy, which is better for like non-elemental enemies, and she does regenerate way more charge fragments, so you have basically an infinite Teddy if you run her in the lead. However, in the late game, you will have elemental enemies, and I cannot recommend using I cannot recommend using her in the late game. Cyberclops is essentially required because he makes your Teddy an energy Teddy, and that is much better against elemental enemies because you're going to be doing half damage if you have a physical one. So you kind of have to use Cyberclops, and he is a full-on DPS Outlander, which means you will not have phase shift. He is, if I'm not mistaken, one of, if not the only Outlander in the game that doesn't have a phase shift. But you get Teddy, Shock Tower, and Seismic Smash. Our last build was just Shock Tower and Seismic Smash, so he's got both of those plus a Teddy, and it's a really, really good bonus to have. So I've been using this exact build in almost the entirety of my Ventures run. If you guys have no idea who I am, and that max power level up there means nothing, as I'm recording, that's the max power level. This will not be true in the future. I'm level 51 in Ventures, got all the XP. I'm not interested in going past 50. I'm only 51 for like challenges we were doing with friends, and so yeah, Cyberclops carried me essentially the entire way, and that is because of, again, happy holidays, reducing the cooldown, and this whole build is attack weighted. So I'm going to start from the bottom because we just talked about it. If you guys are skipping around timestamps, you probably might have missed this, but static cling just gives you more affliction damage with Shock Tower. Really, really nice. You can get them from the book. Going coconuts, health damage, great. Fragment generation is kind of key because Shock Tower and Teddy is going to be a lot of your damage output, and I highly recommend grabbing fragments as you run around the map. That is very, very important because spamming the Teddy just takes no energy if you use the fragment, and I believe the cooldown is also reduced. Back in the day, it used to buff damage. It doesn't do that anymore, unfortunately, but yeah, running around grabbing those fragments is great. Something I learned that might even be way too obvious, but I didn't know it for a long time, were llama fragments do give you a fragment. You don't have to smack the llama. So that might be super obvious to some of you, but it was a mind blow for me and everybody in chat who didn't know it, and I highly recommend grabbing even the llama fragments because more Teddy, more Shock Tower. It's a win, and fragment generation also gives you more of that. What differs from my previous build, because we didn't have a Teddy, is Teddy damage is just straight up bonus by Trailblazer Quinn. That's an easy win. 30% is good. And pressing charges gives you a straight up 30% damage bonus to fragment abilities. Fragment abilities does not include the grenade fragments for some reason. I don't believe she works on grenades. If I'm wrong, hey, comment down below. I'd like for her to bonus that. But from what I can gather, fragment abilities means Shock Tower and Teddy. So if you have a charge fragment, little +1 or anything more than that down in the bottom right there, then she will give you a 30% damage bonus straight up. This is an Art Deco hero. Gumshoe is fantastic. I vouchered her back before you could research her normally. So go ham. Go to the Art Deco section. Research her like a normal hero. Super duper worth it. I highly recommend this build. It has done me wonders because in Ventures, you are reliant on vending machines and random chests and a bunch of RNG bullcrap, okay? I'm a vending machine hater. I want to craft my own weapons, and by using a build like this, I don't have to rely on weapons. His abilities are good for 90% of the enemies you're going to come across, unless it's like a mini-boss or a big smasher. This will do the trick, and it's really good for crowd clearing. It does the trick for pretty much every season. All right. We've gotten off the ability spams. Let's get into a hybrid build. So you might recognize Star Spangled Headhunter from my Rocket Loadout video, linked down below. I also brought this up, I believe, in my previous Fun Loadouts video because spamming rocket launchers is fantastic. However, Joshie B in Discord recommended using shotguns. Now, I know that you can use her with every weapon. I always knew this, but by having her in the lead, you're instantly taking away all of the damage bonus from the commander slot. Only when you have a war cry is she even helping you in any way. Reducing ammo doesn't always work, but shotguns are really, really good on their own. They don't necessarily need a good loadout, and if you put a mag size perk on a room sweeper, you go from 35 shots to, so long as her war cry is active, about 70 bullets. And I differed from Joshie B's recommendation. He wanted to go double mag size light show Spitfire. I don't think that's necessary. You can get well over 100 bullets in your mag size doing that. It's a huge percent bonus, but I wanted my bullets to mean damage rather than just having more of them, because I figured if anything can survive 70 shots from a crit build room sweeper, I'd be surprised. It would have to be a mini boss, and I did not find anything in my mission that really held up against that. We have the typical rocket build here because Warcry is ridiculous right now. Just the cooldown is forever. You need a 17% decrease. You need a 3-second addition from Ghoul Trooper Ramirez. We've got base solo in here, buffing it up to 6 seconds if we can get 15 kills. It's a lot of support perks we need to decrease the cooldown of the Warcry, but once you have all that active, Critical Blast and support is technically better than the typical Shrapnel Headhunter, but both of them would be completely fine, and I think Quick Fingers was great here because we are not running a reload perk, and instead of waiting 3 seconds, I'd rather just throw a grenade and get back into the action. So kind of a recycled old build, but if you pair this with a shotgun, it's a really, really fun time, and you can do this with pretty much any weapon in the game, should you be crazy enough to try it. Alright, so before we get into this last build, I want to say an honorable mention, and that is Paleo Luna. She was probably the most recommended build in the entire game, but I feel like Paleo Luna is so mainstream. Everybody knows that fast swinging melees are great, and I feel like that just didn't fit in a video like this where I'm trying to show unique ways to play. So we're gonna get into a really old build that I've not really drawn too much light to on this channel, and that is a triple crit damage candy corn LMG. First and foremost, this weapon being locked to physical holds it back a lot. However, it is one of the unique ARs that has not only triple crit damage, but over 100 rounds in the magazine. And that makes it a very, very prime candidate for a totally rockin' out build. I also have Tactical Assault Sledgehammer in the lead, giving us 225% more crit damage, which gives us a 680% crit damage bonus. I also, because Chaos Agent exists, don't need to run a reload perk, so we slapped a damage perk on top of it. And here are the numbers. This is a DPS calculator that was made by me and a friend of mine. Link to the video down below. If we have Totally Rockin' Out fully active, we're talking the full 160 crit rating, that 7% going on top of 10%, we are getting nearly 750,000 DPS, which is a lot. And that's why I say, even with physical, if you cut this in half, it is still about 370,000 DPS, which you can see on the right-hand side, tops pretty much every single weapon I've ever tested. I forgot to mention in the recording that the weapons on the right-hand side, their numbers were recorded without a loadout active. So the Candy Corn LMG, of course, is going to be a lot stronger here. Even physical, cutting the damage in half, still has a Totally Rockin' Out bonus on top of it. So a lot of those weapons with a proper build are going to match up pretty closely, but the Candy Corn LMG with Totally Rockin' Out is still a very strong build. You'll see in a second. Even physical versus an elemental enemy, cutting our damage in half, it's still very strong. Now, I do want to point out one potential error in our calculator, and that's that it doesn't seem that headshot damage is being multiplied by the crits. I'm not 100% sure if crit damage does multiply headshot damage, but if it does the way I figure, aiming straight for the head with the full crit rating bonus should be about 1,000,000 DPS, which is a lot. It doesn't really matter. It's going to slay as long as you have Totally Rockin' Out active, but when you don't have it active, your DPS actually plummets about 500,000. You go down to 225,000 DPS, which, as you can see, is still pretty good. It's about on par with a Hacksaw, and it's slightly below Bobcat, Spectre, Thrasher, all of our favorite weapons. But yeah, you're definitely going to want to have Totally Rockin' Out activating your crit rating, because buffing your crit rating even more is just the only way that this build really functions. And finally, it's also important to mention that Rockin' Riff does add 50% damage. However, it's hard to calculate that. Let me explain. We have a 30% damage bonus, a 44% physical damage bonus. If we go to our loadout here, we've got Rescue Trooper Ramirez and support adding 17%. So that 50% damage bonus from Rockin' Riff here is not a clear 50%. It's not going to be an exact bonus. You can't just add 50% to the damage. That's not the way it stacks in this game. So it's not super cut and dry exactly how that'll work, but more damage is more damage, and that's always a good thing. So yeah, here's the build. Tactical Assault Sledgehammer in the lead, Totally Rockin' Out. We're using Battle Beat and Subwafers. Both of these are easily researchable in the rad section. You do need Dennis Jr. for Totally Rockin' Out, unfortunately. Assault damage, I mean, Rescue Trooper, of course, and support. Tactical Assault Sledgehammer needs to be in the lead. You need this crit damage as high as possible. Quick Fingers allows us to reload quickly, and I had some fun. I used explosive rounds. This is not the best option here. This is not absolutely recommended. We are using a very high mag size weapon, so crack shot is worth considering, and Bulletstorm Jonesy is as well. But you guys can kind of make whatever work here. If you can find a bonus that works for you and your playstyle, you can go for it. Maybe even assault ammo recovery to shoot longer. That one's up to you. I even considered using another Rockin' Riff hero. I actually considered using Fumble, because I figured, I don't know, the more we have Totally Rockin' Out active, the better. Maybe this can help in the long run. I don't know. There's a lot of options here, but I preferred explosive rounds just to have a little bit of fun. If you guys enjoyed the video, feel free to use code Mista. Videos like this take a lot of work to make. I really appreciate it. You guys can hang out on Twitch, link down below. I record these videos on stream pretty often, and I even make them on stream. So if you guys want to see a behind the scenes process thing, you guys can go ahead and follow down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a nice day. And then